Hey, everybody, and welcome to The Deep Dive. We're diving into something pretty heavy today, but also incredibly important. We're going to be looking at the mental health of young people.
Oh, yeah.
And we're seeing this kind of alarming rise in anxiety, depression and burnout among teens and young adults. And it's pretty heartbreaking, frankly.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of fascinating. And frankly, a little scary how it's not just one thing.
Right.
It's kind of this tangled web of pressures and anxieties and just systemic issues that are kind of colliding.
Yeah.
And we've got, a stack of research articles and expert opinions here. And honestly, some of the findings are pretty shocking, even for someone like me who studies this stuff.
Right. Like we all know, social media has its downsides.
Yeah.
But I mean, one study we have here actually found that a full 60% of teenagers reported feeling worse about their bodies after using Instagram. Perpetual comparison is one thing, but that stat really drives home the impact,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine being a teenager already grappling with identity and self-esteem and then being bombarded with these perfectly curated online lives.
Right.
It's like constantly being told you're not good enough, thin enough, rich enough, happy enough.
Yeah.
It's no wonder their self-esteem takes a hit.
And then you add in the pressure to maintain this perfect online persona, dealing with cyberbullying. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And then I think back, when I was a teenager, I remember being so stressed out about college applications and test scores. Like my entire future hinged on these things.
Yeah, and that pressure cooker hasn't cooled down. In fact, I think it's probably gotten worse.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Think about it. Young people today are facing this unprecedented level of uncertainty.
Right.
Climate change,
Yeah.
economic instability, a global pandemic. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah, one article actually used the term climate anxiety.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's such a heavy weight to carry.
Exactly.
It's tough.
They're constantly hearing about this looming environmental crisis.
Yeah.
And it's impacting everything, their outlook on the future, their career choices, even their relationships.
Right. Okay, so we've got the social media pressures, the academic anxieties, this looming fear of the future. And then there's this other piece that really struck me in these sources.
Yeah.
And it's about the support systems, or rather the lack of support systems that young people have today. What do you think? Have you noticed a shift in these traditional support structures? I mean, even just in my lifetime, it feels like things have changed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a crucial question. We used to have these close-knit families, strong neighborhoods, maybe even religious communities that provided this safety net for young people.
Yeah.
But the research is showing that those traditional networks have been steadily declining.
Wow.
And it's leaving young people feeling isolated and adrift.
Right. It's like that safety net is fraying.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's completely gone.
Yeah. And then you add in family issues.
Right.
Which sadly are pretty common. Divorce conflict, financial stress.
Yep.
All of these things just add to the burden. It's like navigating a storm without an anchor.
Yeah, it's really tough. And this brings us to another sensitive but incredibly important topic.
Okay.
The stigma around mental health.
Uh-huh.
And these sources are highlighting how difficult it is for young people to talk about their struggles.
Yeah, and that's where the real tragedy lies. So many young people are suffering in silence because they're afraid to speak up. They're worried about being judged, labeled as weak, or even punished.
Right. Like it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
We need to normalize those conversations, right?
Absolutely. But there's so many barriers. The sources mention shame, fear of judgment, not to mention the very real financial constraints and limited access to services.
Yeah.
It can be a heartbreaking cycle.
Right.
And it often prevents that early intervention, which we know is crucial.
Right. And we can't just tell them it's okay to talk and then not provide the resources that they need. And there's another layer to this, and honestly, this is one that I struggle with too.
Okay.
The sources call it the overstuffed life.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't feel like their schedule is bursting at the seams these days?
You're not alone. It's a widespread issue.
Right.
And it's directly impacting mental health. We're constantly connected. We're sleep deprived. We're running on empty.
Yeah.
Our brains and bodies are just not designed for this kind of chronic stress.
Like, you're telling me that my constant email checking and doom scrolling is actually bad for me?
Well, let's just say
Shocking.
it's not exactly promoting inner peace and tranquility.
Okay, fair enough.
Our brains need downtime to process, to rest, to recharge.
Right.
But with this constant barrage of notifications and demands, we're stuck in this state of hyperarousal. which is incredibly damaging over time.
So what's the answer? Do we need to wrap young people in bubble wrap and protect them from every little stressor? Because the sources also talk about resilience and this idea that maybe we've gone too far in trying to create a safe world for them.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? On the one hand, we want to protect them from harm. But on the other hand, we need to allow them to face challenges and develop coping skills. If they never learn to navigate setbacks, how will they ever thrive in the real world?
It's like that saying, smooth seas don't make skillful sailors. We need a little bit of wind in our sails, right? But how do we find that balance? Where do we even begin?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The sources actually offer some concrete solutions.
Oh.
And they might surprise you.
Ooh, a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
We'll have to pause here and come back to those solutions our next segment. Don't go anywhere.
All right, so picking up where we left off, let's unpack some of these potential solutions. The sources offer this kind of multi-pronged approach, which I think is really encouraging.
Okay.
It's not about finding one magic bullet, but rather addressing this issue from all sides.
Right, okay. But give it to me straight. What can we actually do? Because it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this. Like, where do we even begin?
You're absolutely right. It is overwhelming. But remember, knowledge is power.
Okay.
And once we understand the complexities, we can start taking action. And one of the key takeaways here is the importance of mental health education.
Okay.
And starting early.
So we're talking about like teaching kids about stress management, coping mechanisms, emotional intelligence, all that good stuff.
Exactly. Imagine if emotional intelligence was considered just as fundamental as reading or math.
Right.
We'd be equipping young people with the tools they need to navigate the inevitable ups and downs of life starting from a young age.
I love that. It's like giving them a mental health toolkit.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of waiting until they're in crisis, we're giving them the skills to build resilience from the get-go.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
We can teach them things like mindfulness techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy concepts, even simple breathing exercises. These tools can help them manage stress, regulate their emotions, and build a sense of self-efficacy.
Okay, that's a great start. But what about the kids who are already struggling? We talked about limited access to services, the stigma around seeking help.
Yeah.
How do we address that?
That's a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
We need to make therapy and counseling more accessible and affordable.
Right.
That means reducing wait times, expanding insurance coverage, and creating more low-barrier services.
Oh, okay.
We also need to address the stigma head-on. Seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Couldn't agree more. And while we're at it, let's tackle the digital world, too.
Yes.
We can't exactly unplug young people from their devices.
Right.
But maybe we can help them develop a healthier relationship with technology.
Yeah.
What do the sources say about that?
They actually have some great insights on this. They highlight the importance of things like digital detox and media literacy.
Okay.
Imagine teaching young people how to critically evaluate the information they're consuming online.
Right. How to set boundaries and how to prioritize real-world connections over virtual ones.
So less scrolling, more strolling.
Right. Exactly.
Trading those filtered selfies for genuine human interaction.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
And speaking of real-world connections, that lack of support we were talking about earlier makes fostering those connections even more crucial.
Yeah.
And the research suggests that strengthening communities can have a huge impact.
Okay.
We're talking about creating spaces where young people feel seen, heard, and valued.
It's like rebuilding that safety net we talked about earlier, right?
Yes.
Creating those spaces where they can connect with others who understand what they're going through.
Right.
Who can offer support and guidance.
Precisely. And this can happen in so many ways.
Yeah.
Mentorship programs, youth groups, after-school activities, community events.
Right.
Anything that fosters that sense of belonging and shared experience.
I love that it's about creating that sense of community, of knowing that you're not alone in this.
But the sources also point to something bigger, right? Something about policy changes.
Yes. This is where we kind of zoom out and look at the larger systemic issues.
Okay.
Think about those big picture anxieties that young people are facing. Climate change, economic instability, a competitive job market.
Right.
Addressing these issues at a policy level can help alleviate some of that long-term fear and uncertainty.
So it's not just about individual coping mechanisms. It's about creating a world that's actually worth feeling optimistic about.
Exactly. It's about investing in a future where young people feel empowered, supported, and hopeful.
Yeah.
And this brings us to a really important question for you, dear listener.
Right.
Out of everything we've discussed, what resonates most with you?
Yeah.
What actions or solutions feel most relevant to your own life and experiences?
Yeah, because we've covered a lot of ground here.
Right.
But it's all about what we do with this knowledge.
Exactly.
How do we take this information and turn it into action?
Absolutely. Even small steps can make a difference. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we want to leave you with this challenge. What is one small step you can take today to support the well-being of young people in your life or community?
It could be as simple as, just having an open conversation with a young person in your life.
Yeah. Or just sharing, a helpful resource like a website or a book.
Right. Or maybe it's advocating for change in your local school or community.
Yeah. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in supporting the mental health of young people.
Right. And it's like those even small ripples can create waves of change.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. We don't need to have all the answers or solve everything overnight.
Yeah.
It's about taking those small steps, having those conversations, and building a more supportive and understanding world for the next generation.
Yeah, it's so true. We don't have to be therapists or policymakers to make a difference. It's about those everyday acts of kindness and support that can really shift the tide.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey. There are countless individuals, organizations, and communities that are dedicated to improving the mental health of young people.
Right. There's a whole network of support out there, and we'll be sure to include some helpful resources in the show notes for you.
Absolutely. We've got your back.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to reach out, connect with others, and get involved.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into this complex and, frankly, pretty heavy topic. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a mix of emotions right now.
Yeah, me too. It's definitely a lot to process, but I think it's important to hold space for both the heaviness and the hope.
Yeah. We can't shy away from the challenges, but we also can't lose sight of the solutions and the incredible resilience of young people.
Yeah. They are facing so much right now, but they are also incredibly adaptable and creative and passionate. I mean, they give me hope for the future.
Yeah, me too. So let's leave our listener with one final thought-provoking question to ponder. Knowing what we now know, what is one small step you can take today to support the well-being of young people in your life or community?
Yeah, it's a question worth sitting with. It's a question that can spark action and maybe even change a life.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the, complexities of youth mental health. It's been quite a journey, but hopefully you're walking away with a better understanding of the challenges, the potential solutions, and most importantly, the power we all have to make a difference.
Absolutely. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and let's keep the conversation going.
Until next time, happy diving.